Welcome to the Log Home Network podcast, where we help you realize your log home dreams by way of education, discussion, and interviews with log home industry experts. Grab some coffee, tea, or whatever you like to drink, and let's learn about log homes together. This is Dana here from the Log Home Network, and I'm here with expert Herb Meeker again. Herb came to me. God put something on Herb's heart that to share with you all. From what I understand, you were having a shower moment. I think many of us have shower moments, where it seems like our intelligence goes through the roof for about 5 minutes and we capture it. And the topic of the wildfires in California, by the way, if you're out there in California, our thoughts and our prayers are with you. I can't imagine. Herb is closer to the action, but I just can't imagine what you all are going through. Some of you have log homes that you're watching burn, and that tears me up. A lot of work, a lot of energy, a lot of effort, a lot of finances, a lot of dreams that you've placed into that have, are going up in smoke. And that's a lot of great craftsmanship. There's a verse that talks about, man, I can't remember. I want to say it's in Hebrews, but the workman has more honor than, it's like the workman has more honor than the house that's built, right? Because it represents the workmanship of the person. And there's a lot of great craftsmen out there that are crying right now too. They're like, oh my goodness, I spent so much time and energy building that and seeing things happen. That's just, and other craftsmen, other trades craftsmen, not just log home, a lot of homes just in general, a lot of beautiful places. So Herb, you came to me and you've got this kind of like quasi outline. We will be as flexible as you want to be with any of this. But we want to Herb wanted to share with you all some tips, some things that you should be thinking about if you're in some of these fire zones, an area that might, have, wildfires might be common. Or even if it's not common and you just want to hedge against it. So with that, Herb, you're the expert in my opinion, you're in this small group at the top where the very best cream is. And, because of your experience and the amount of years that you've put into this industry. So I'm really pleased that you reached out to me and that we could do this, and take it away. And if I interrupt, it's only because I'm an idiot. I'm trying on my quest to learn everything I can. So if I interrupt, have patience with me, but please talk to us with what's on your heart today.
Well, actually, this was triggered by several customers that reached out to me after those fires. And I really, we've been through a lot of fires in California, so a fire is not new, but this was definitely an apocalypse, in the scenario that went through Pacific Palisades and Malibu in that area. And it's headed up in the Topanga Canyon area where I have 5 or 6 customers on log homes that I've worked on over the years. So I tend to track these fires. I'm kind of a natural disaster nut, I guess is what it is. So when they're going off, my wife gets tired of me being following these issues. But and part of it's for concern, but part of it's also just so I can learn from these natural disasters how to better protect log homes or mountain homes or homes that are in questionable areas in general. So I'm trying to better my knowledge too by these events and not make it just, I don't want to languish on other people's, disasters either. I want to make it so we can harden log homes and harden mountain homes to make them better for these situations. And people start thinking about it when these situations come up, but really, it's too late. If your friend's house is burning down the street to harden up your log home. So the conversation needs to happen long before that. And I've been involved in several projects in the last few years where the insurance company has required the customer to upgrade their home to meet new requirements that they're coming up with, in addition to the California State Fire Marshal in the requirements that he has for these areas. In California, it's called the SRA zone, a state restricted area. And so there's more requirements in those areas than, in other areas of California. But and there's a lot of political issues here, and it's pretty easy to get into that. One of my customers sent me an article by Robert Reich, a journalist, and he's a liberal journalist, but actually he hit the nail on the head because he said, in summary, he said, things will change in California in some ways, but then when it's all through, everything will be the same. And that's what happens a lot of times in these disasters that everybody's up in arms and they want to make things better or change things, but then people get used to not having a fire in their backyard, and they don't worry about it anymore. So
is that kind of the same thing with earthquakes? And if you're in an area that might have earthquakes, but if there's like a 40-year span when nothing has happened, and then all of a sudden it happens again, then it's the reawakening of all of the regulation and everything.
exactly.
Yeah.
And that's true with fires too. So not to keep it, the subject simmering, but it's definitely a topic, of the time. And I think it's a good time for people to look at their home with these glasses on of what should I do to make my house more fire resistant. I don't know that you can make a house fireproof, but you want to make it less flammable is what you want to do. And so
So
that's
let me ask you a question just about like traditional construction versus a log home construction. Um, is one or the other? I know we've got some things in here like lattice work and things like that around the home and things like that that can just be like a tinderbox for
right.
a fire. So let's just throw that extra little, all the like extra little stuff things out. But let's just say, and I know we're comparing apples and oranges here because
Right.
traditional home and log home are really so starkly different as far as just the aesthetics and everything of that nature. And you are talking about the wall being completely wood. But just on as close to face value as you can get, if there's a log home and a traditionally built log home, or if there's a log home and a traditionally built home, the same distance from an oncoming fire, does one or the other have any advantage over the fire? I mean, or is this like, man, really everybody needs to be doing some things, but we're just kind of like honing in on the log home thing? Or is, are both equally vulnerable just by nature of what fire is?
Yeah. I mean, that picture of that lone white house in Malibu, 4 stories tall, that was built out of concrete, stone, and, rock, with the houses all around it burned, that's a pretty good clue as to what
Yeah.
the best material is. Logs, are definitely more susceptible to fire because, their wood burns. But in my helping customers and trying to consult with people to make their home less fire or more fire resistant, I say let's get rid of the kindling, let's get rid of the log railing, let's get rid of the lattice work that's below it. Let's get rid of the E vents where fire can get into it. Let's get rid of the gable vents that accesses fire into your attic. Let's not store our firewood, on the porch. Let's store it someplace else. Let's not have lean-tos or structures that are more flammable than others. Let's not have cedar siding on our gable ends and dormers, which is essentially 1 inch wood, which is more open to fire than having something thicker or of concrete composite. So that's kind of the direction I would come to somebody with their log home in suggesting to make it more fireproof. Change the windows, make it a more fireproof roof than possibly a composition shingles, which is essentially made of asphalt, that's melted. And again, when it gets hot enough, it can catch fire.
Now,
And
so if you got a, like, let's say the one house is a vinyl sided stick built home, and another one's a log home, they're probably going to be fairly close to flammable as far as it, and I don't know how far, as far as the sheetrock goes, how retardant that's going to be toward, for this traditional home. But as far as the destructive force on the outside, you're really talking pretty close, do you think?
no, I mean, I've had several log homes go through fires, and they've done considerably better than even plaster homes, in the neighborhood. There was one in Tuna Canyon, and I don't have the photo with me, but it was up above Malibu there, and it had the same type of fire that they're having right now with Santa Ana winds. And this home was log home, but it had metal roof. It didn't have overhangs. It didn't have porches and a lot of things that can contribute to home catching fire. And the homes around it burned. The firemen took a stand at their home and actually protected it because it was easy to protect. So that's part of what we're trying to accomplish too, is making your home so it can be protected by the firemen in these situations too. So yeah, I have had a couple log homes that have burned. And it's called the Creek Fire up in Shaver Lake in Huntington, close to us. And they were homes that I built 30 some years ago, and they both are gone. I don't know the whole story, but they had all wood decks and log railings and things like that. But it was a pretty fierce fire too. I mean, nobody got through it. Some of them are rebuilding. Actually, Michael with California Log Home Restorations is refinishing the outside of the logs on a new log home that's going up next door to the one that burned down that I had built. So, that does happen, but people are a lot, these are being rebuilt a lot differently than they were built originally
We
now.
talked about that last time, where you talked about how you were taking what you have learned. When you see things happen and you do log home maintenance, you realize, oh, well, we should be making the eaves larger. We should be doing this. We should be doing that. I'm sure, like in your mind, you're probably taking an inventory of things, like thinking about those homes that you built that burned 37 years ago. You're probably like, I probably would, knowing that now.
Yeah.
Is that kind of what drove you to kind of put some of these things together here that were?
Oh, it did. Yeah. I mean, I look at homes that I started building when I was first in the industry, and you're kind of embarrassed almost that you did it back then. But in 30 some years, you learn things, and you learn from both mistakes, and you learn from others' mistakes. And in the case of a fire, you learn from that too, that somebody maybe didn't, substantially fireproof the home. And the requirements have changed the last 10 years too. I mean, we have fire sprinklers that are put in new log homes now, which doesn't help you in a wildfire, but if somebody's smoking in bed, it does help that situation. But we have storage tanks that are required so the fire department can hook up to them. Tempered glass windows, which is a huge thing because in a firestorm, the windows bust out first, and so that lets the fire, enter into the house. So there's lots of things that that the fire marshals have learned too from these fires that they're now requirements, at least in California. So.
You want to start going through, 'cause you've already mentioned a couple of them: the tempered glass, the vinyl around the glass. You've talked about, you mentioned to me in this document, glass just basically falling out of the house because it's basically being melted out of the house, basically, right? In high heat situation. The lattice work being tinder, firewood. You want to start just going down through some of these things so that, how do you want to do this? This is balls in your court.
Well, I know you are marketing to people that are designing their log homes too. So I think we need to talk to that too, not just people that have an existing home. So when you're designing the home, there's a lot you can consider in that. One of them is, how to get the fire equipment up there and how, the location of the house so that it's somewhat preventable, with regards to all the vegetation that's around it. I mean, many of these canyons in Southern California, they have required that they not do anything to them so that the wildlife can go through there. Part of it was, they have mountain lions in oh, it's not MacArthur Park, but a big park down there, and they want to keep that, and they have wildlife crossings and things. So, they have this chaparral and bushes and live oak trees that are very combustible in these areas. So as that fire comes up these canyons, if you're up on the ridge above it, you've got a inferno by the time it gets to your house, sitting on the ridge with the view of the ocean. So in designing a new log home, you really want to address the situation that's going to happen if and when the fire comes. So the planning and the site orientation, landscaping, the road to the site so you can get fire equipment there is important. And specifying materials that aren't, not every log home has logs all the way around it. So a lot of times the gable ends have siding or something like that. So you would want to do something that's more of a composite or something that's thick enough that it's not going to burn. Or they have, materials that go behind the siding that actually prevent it from going into the next, part of the substructure. So there's lots of things in the design that can be addressed, in a log home, to start with. In addition to that, porches they can collect heat and embers. So if they are designed so, the fire's coming up the hill, they're actually captivating those embers and things, and can, the fires has a bigger tendency to start at that point too. And if there's vents into the house, then the embers can get in there, or the heat can build up and light the attic on fire. So those are all design issues. And then picking, materials such as, the roofing, probably metal is the best from what I've seen, but or a flat tile, round clay tile. We saw that in several of these homes, that it got up underneath those clay tiles and got the roof on fire.
Personally, I don't want to have to get back up there and shingle. I'm just being honest. I just want to do it once, man. I got back problems. I don't want to get up there again, man. I'm like, if when it comes time that we're actually able to, or our own family able to pull the trigger and do something, I'm like, I want to do a metal roof anyway, just
Right.
because of the practical longevity of a roof. Going back to, as you think about the road going in and everything, I'm just thinking typically when you're building your log home, you might have maintained a decent road that can support trucks in and out at the beginning, right? Because you're building your log home, you got equipment being brought in and out, you got excavation being done. So all of that requires moving machinery around, which typically you're going to have a pretty good gravel driveway, at least coming in into your home. But my guess is that after your home is done and you forget about, well, I don't really need to maintain that big of a driveway anymore because it's
Right.
just, consumer vehicles in and out of my space. But if you've got any length of a driveway that, you're just leaving that unmaintained, so that only small vehicles get in and out, my guess is that you're asking for a problem down the road. If there is an event where you got to get a fire truck, you got to get equipment in there. So like thinking about the log home, the long-term maintenance of the driveway to your log home is probably something you need to think about early, and then continue to do a checkpoint every couple, 3-5 years. It's probably not even that much because the road's not going to degrade that much, as far as what's accessible. But
Oh, you'd be surprised too. I mean, especially on the maintenance end of it in the last 20 some years, we show up on sites and we don't understand how they got the construction equipment up there because it's impossible for us to get a truck and a trailer up there. But But what you said is exactly right. They've let the bushes overgrown. It's washed out on one side, and we're trying to get a house in, I mean, trucks and trailers in there to do the maintenance on a home, and it's next to impossible. I don't know how they got the concrete truck in there originally to put the foundation in, or the lumber truck or the log truck to get them up there. I mean, some of these are, amazing in the places they've perched them or located them. But yeah, some of them, it's all we can do to get there to maintain them with a full-size truck, pickup and trailer. So
and
you're
we're
right.
talking about log homes, but really any home you build, what you decide on, this shouldn't be a deal breaker for saying, well, I don't want to get a log home then, because any home you get that it might be in an area where there's a tendency to have wildfires, this could likely be an issue regardless, unless you're building out of stone.
Right.
Um, and another consideration as we were talking about that is just distance, just thinking about your distance to any sort of reservoir,
Right.
unless you're going to maintain your own reservoir in an area. And I don't know what that's like in California. I mean, do they have good reservoirs between some of these areas that that help furnish water to fight these fires, or is that just kind of like, is that like 2020 vision, as you're looking backward?
Oh, you're on your own, really, in most of these areas. Now, where the fires were in Pacific Palisades, that all had fire systems. I mean, there was two, I think three million or million gallon tanks. So they had, water when the fire started, but once they start pumping it, those tanks emptied, and there was a reservoir that they didn't have filled up. I mean, and I'm sure somebody's head's going to roll on that. But that's, if I say, I'm sorry, California has very little water. I mean, people just, it's essentially a desert that brings water from Northern California through big aqueducts down to Southern California. The LA basin couldn't exist if they hadn't have made some deals back in the previous centuries to get water down there. And so that is why there's reservoirs down there. But here in Central California, most new homes are required to have a storage tank. So you probably have four, maybe even 10,000 gallon tank. Even in front of my building, I have a 10,000 gallon tank because there's no fire hydrants within miles. So, if I have a fire, then somebody has to hook up and, utilize that to put the fire out. And the same with homes, the fire truck may show up with 500 gallons, but if you don't have a storage tank, he's going to run out and your pump's not going to pump enough water. And by then the power's out, and maybe the power's out already because in California, they shut off the power with high winds in a preemptive move, they call it red flag warning. So they do that to try to keep the fire, possibility down by turning off the power. So anyway, you're pretty much on your own to answer your question as to having water reserves. Now we do in some of these homes we built, we have swimming pools and we have connections to the pool. So they might have 20,000 gallons because it sucks out of the bottom of the pool. My house, I have a river, but if the river's not running that year, we're in trouble. So hold on a
Yeah.
second. I'm gonna take a drink of water.
Yeah. Help yourself. So you've built more than 200 log homes. In those log homes, do you find that there's, are the homeowners, have they been thought through having some sort of a fire break as far as like having the forest, you know, pushed back a certain distance from their home? And I'm speaking from being an idiot here because I don't know. Maybe they don't allow you to cut forest and fire breaks in California. I don't know. But what's that like? Are these homes that are a lot of homes just sitting like right in the middle of, there's a tree, 20 feet this way and 20 feet this way and really close
Yeah,
to the
some of them are
homes?
closer
Or
than that. Some of them are 4 or 5 feet from the house. So, yeah, and especially in the past, they built them right next to trees, so that was not unusual. Some of that's changed lately because they've had a lot of trees die from a bug and beetle kill, and so some of these areas have been opened up some because of that. But sometimes now in the last 10 years, yeah, that's been addressed. And the counties or the jurisdictions require some sort of a fire plan. So answer your question, as of more recent, they have. But, the existing log homes, they do have a fire marshal that comes around once a year. And that's any mountain home in these SRA areas. They actually get an inspection. My own home gets inspected, and we have to put the firewood someplace else, or move something. I mean, we had to trim all the branches that came over our house, which made the house look nice, but again, if they catch fire, it all falls on the house and can start the house on fire. So yeah, I live in this type of environment, so we meet with this inspector once a year or two.
So I'm just looking down through your list of different sorts of tips here. Don't use plastic or vinyl type of windows. Don't use the lattice. Just save yourself the money on the lattice and go start invest some of that money into a better window. The metal roofing. Speak a little bit about like the attic vents and the gable end vents. And you've got some notes here about that I'm guessing when you say like they're metal openings on them, that some have a vinyl trim on them. Is that?
Well, on a lot of attic vents, and in most areas they require some venting because they, for several reasons, for mold and for condensation and things. It's best to have moisture moving through it. The problem is when you have a fire, it also lets fire in. So they do make vents that are heat sensitive, that close up, or you can manually close them too. So but the size of the vent is important too. An ember doesn't have to be very big to get into your attic to start a fire. So that's something that's important, to look at the venting into your attic space, because if there's openings, then there's embers that can get in. If you've got even a 50-mile-an-hour wind, then embers flying ahead of a fire, those are all wind driven, and they can go in any crevice, crack, hole in a home. So any home's going to be subject to that if they've got the embers flying ahead of the fire. So
when we talk about embers, I think about having a campfire in the backyard, right. And I think about you take you pick up a pine branch off the ground, and the needles, how they all shrivel up, and then they're just in the air, and everybody's swatting them around trying to stay out of them. You don't want the embers in your hair, but really that's kind of like on steroids. You've got a tree that's gone up, and it's just spewing embers constantly out of it from all of these little needles and things that are just, and then of course, even as the larger parts burn, they're still going to create embers that are going to, burn off and go. But, that's a flood of that happening around your home, and then crossing your fingers to say, oh, don't go up my, don't go in my vents or whatever. Don't get in my hair, basically, is what you're hoping. But if you don't move, it's gonna, outside of a campfire, you're moving around. You avoid it. But you're not gonna. Your house doesn't say, "Oh, there's embers. I'm gonna move."
Yeah, it happened even in the palm trees down there in the LA fires. You'd see the embers catch on them. Pretty soon, the old palm fronds are catching fire, and pretty soon the embers are blowing to the house across the street. So wow. It can happen in a even in a modern landscape setting. So.
My name is Dana, and welcome to the Log Home Network. We are here to help you get connected with the right log home expert. Whether you are ready to get started on your log home dream or are already a log home owner looking to maintain or expand your current log home, we are here to serve you. Getting connected with log home experts is super easy. Just go to loghome.net, select your needs, and search by city or zip code to be presented with a list of experts ready to help you on your log home journey. If you don't know exactly what you are looking for, don't worry, we have you covered. Simply scroll down on the loghome.net homepage and fill out the Log Home Expert Connection form, and we will help you get connected to the right expert. Don't let your log home dreams fade. Go to loghome.net right now and connect with friendly industry experts that are ready to help you. Porch structure and all of the firewood. Now, you think about firewood, think about BTUs, because that's kind of like BTUs is how we measure how much heat, we get out of our stoves and everything. But when you think about a stack of firewood, you need to be thinking about the amount of BTUs that are being released in a short period of time, because all of that firewood is being, and the fire is the gases, the gases have come off, and it's the wood actually isn't burning; it's wood vapor, right? I'm Fireman 101 I took up in a small town in Danforth, but up in Maine when we were up there.
Okay.
It's the vapor that's coming off. And the more heat there is, the more vapor there is. The more vapor there is, the more that's going to burn. The more heat there is, the more vapor. That is just a vicious cycle happening around that area. So they're not going to, and these are things that you're going to have to do that are not going to be convenient.
Right.
I'm going to get my wood from over here, or I'm only going to keep a small portion, maybe 2 or 3 days worth, close here, and then I'm going to keep the rest over here, and I'll restock my portion that I need for the week or whatever, on a more regular basis, and be inconvenienced by it. But that inconvenience could save, could save some devastating damage if
Oh yeah. Yeah.
yeah.
Especially in the off season when you don't need that firewood on there, best to get it out of there and far away. So
the nice fancy rails and everything that everybody likes to have. Herb, that's for some people, that's like ingrained in their mind when they envision their log home.
that's right.
Are there products that people can use over these that will help retard fire? Or is this basically you're saying, you know what, you probably need to make some better choices if you're living in one of these fire zones? It's not just a matter of maintaining this with some sort of product that you're going to paint on or spray on. This is like you're talking about the heat that's going to be released when this happens is not going to be avoidable, whatever.
Exactly right. I mean, we have a customer that called us, after this fire on a project that we're going to do this year. And they said, hey, there's these fires, can you come up with some sort of a solution to put on the outside of our home to stop the fire? And we said, this is probably what helped trigger this reaching out to you in this conversation, is that we said, there's a lot of other issues on your home besides treating something on the logs. The wisteria that's growing up your back porch shouldn't be there. It's gonna catch fire as the fire comes up the hill. All the vents that go into your attic are wide open. They're large, mesh on it. There's lattice around the bottom of it. There's just a lot of kindling all around your house, and then you have bushes next to your house. That's what needs to be addressed, rather than try to come up with some fire resistant solution that could be toxic. It may not. I don't know. I've tried to stay away from that, but there are some requirements now that you use those solutions on raw wood. So that it is a consideration, but I would personally address the other areas of kindling that are going to light your house on fire rather than the surface of your logs myself. So.
Okay. Larger, like some of these are just small rails, and of course that's more welcoming. It seems like, and is this a, I don't know if this is truth, what I'm going to say here, so it's a question, but larger logs, as far as some of that goes, is that better, worse, the same? Like if you're using larger log rails, or is it just like, you know what, it ain't going to work once fire starts?
Well, larger log rails would probably be, yeah. You know how lighting a log in your fireplace, it takes some kindling to get it going. So I would say, yeah, it would be more resistant, but metal's a whole lot more resistant than logs. And of course, that's not typical of a log home to have a metal railing, but people are going to that, and it's pretty common. And the log railings are hard to maintain. Most of the
Sure.
ones that you put in 15 years ago are being removed and something else put in there.
Okay. All right. Which is too bad because then where those go down through to support your your rail where they come right up through. And a lot of them I've seen they've come right up through, and your deck
Right.
is basically they've been
Notched
fitted,
around it.
notched around it,
Yeah.
and then you're cutting that off, or you got to cut it below and you got to hide it. Um,
Well, and that's not usually the ones that are removed. It's the railings in between the large
okay,
posts.
I got you.
A lot of times those posts, other than we have an issue with them rotting on the bottom, where the water, collects on them, they usually aren't so much the problem. I looked at a home 2 years ago, and those columns were all in good shape, but the deck and the railing is what caught fire, and the firemen got there and put that out before it traveled on into the home. But the large posts, again, they were singed, but they were not the issue. It was the railings that caught fire as the fire was coming up the canyon to this home. So
Yeah, dry cedar small dry cedar you can just light with a match. I mean that's why we use it for kindling.
exactly.
But are there woods that would make better choices over other woods in some of these areas, or is it the cedar's just so common?
There may be the hardwoods are a little harder to light on fire. I mean, there are some log homes made out of oak. There's a few made out of redwood. Redwood's a little more resistant, but even lack of maintenance on the outside of a log home, the more cracks, checks, just raw wood, it's going to burn easier than if you've got a nice smooth finish on it too.
Right.
So, but the finish can be, there's a choice between oil-based and water-based finish. I know of a log home that burned pretty much because of the old oil-based finish it had on it. Once it started traveling around it, the finish caught on fire first, and then eventually got up into the eaves, and the home was destroyed. So, the type of finish that you put on the log home can be a concern too, especially um, there's a lot of different, finishes to put on a home actually.
Back a little bit to the railing piece and just thinking decoratively, because there's so many things that we do that we want to. We're creative people.
Yeah.
God has instilled to us creativity. We love to be creative. We love things that have design qualities and all of that to them. But it seems like there's a balance here with I want to be creative and decorative, but I should probably give great consideration to what the material is
Right.
that's being used to decorate. Just like you think of a wreath that you might put on your door in the over Christmas. That's balsam fir, right?
Yeah.
And balsam fir. I mean, it's beautiful and it's great decoration. But if you had that all over the place, man, just a match, and it goes up like crazy. We used to cut up our Christmas tree and burn it in the backyard in January in Maine, and whew, that'll throw some heat. So that there seems like there's a balance between is how the just the decoration aspect of it with what I'm going to use for materials to do that. And you've got to get, it seems like you've got to get, if you're doing things that are attaching building into your home, that you've got to kind of get your builder or the person that's crafting some of these things on board with the idea that you're trying to do this, some of these things with the idea of keeping the tinder as low as possible.
Exactly.
All right, talk to us about landscaping here.
Well, landscaping, can contribute to fires, considerably. I saw a video of Steph Curry's home down there in Malibu. And if you look at that from a drone, he's got no plants for at least 100 feet from his home. I mean, it's gravel and concrete, but he's exposed all the chaparral around him. So, minimal landscaping is going to be better next to your home. You can landscape it farther out, but it can all contribute to the kindling that's going to light your house on fire when a firestorm comes. So that's something that you want to minimize anything that's next to the house. I mean, that's the first thing I tell people, and it's also can contribute to the rot and lack of degrading of your logs too. If you've got a tree or a bush right next to the house, and it can allow bugs to enter your house too. So there's lots of reasons not to plant next to your home, but the farther out you can get it and the less combustible. I mean, there's lots of evergreens that burn pretty quickly, in our area here. So even though it's green all year long, doesn't mean it's fire resistant. So
and I'm guessing things like rose bushes and things like that aren't as big of a threat, and they're beautiful, as long as you keep them trimmed, and don't just let everything get out of control.
right.
There's probably a lot of really beautiful landscape options that you can do with just sculpting the land and retaining walls with flowered bushes and things like that aren't going to be that do have some tender value to them, but aren't just going to be this welcoming,
Right.
for as welcoming to you think so?
Well, yeah, and maintaining the landscaping too. I mean, unfortunately, many homes are landscaped and then they allow these to grow, and they're not tempered, or they're not moderated in that they're still branches and leaves and needles and everything underneath them. That's all, combustible material to light the tree on fire and then light the house on fire that the wind's blowing through. So you kind of have to consider the whole picture when you're landscaping as to what it's going to be in 10 years too, or 15 years. So,
I know that one of the first things that when we have our being in North Carolina, pretty much the first thing that a maintenance guy told me, he says, get into one of the termite protection insurance, whatever protection companies, get into their system, and don't skimp on it. Do it every year. And the first thing that they do every year when they walk around the home is they're looking for anything anything that's grown up against the home,
right.
because they're also doing like just regular bug control stuff too. But that might also be, help in other ways too. It's healthy. You said earlier, it's healthy for a lot of reasons not to have things growing right up against your home, rot and things like that. You get, something that a bush or whatever that's just constantly getting the storms and picking up water and laying on your home. And then all of a sudden you've got this section that you notice, one day, and it didn't happen in a day.
Yeah.
It happened because it was sitting there for probably months or even years and causing this problem that you didn't notice.
Right.
So with just thinking about the landscape and that aspect of it, that's probably like if somebody's got a threat to something, to a fire, and they're like being like, man, we're going to have to leave. It's probably, it might be a day or so before we have to leave our home. Should they just be out there like cutting down bushes and clearing a break around their house before they take off?
I would. And that's, if the firemen are going to take a stand on your house, sometimes that's what they do. If they're going to park their truck in front of your house, they don't want the eucalyptus tree falling on top of their fire truck when it catches on fire. So yeah, I've seen that on occasion where they're cutting the low growth next to the house, and they're gonna protect you, because that's where they're making their stand in that neighborhood. But Yeah, if you can do that before they get there, that's better off too. So um, you're better off doing it before the fire is coming down the driveway, though. So
Mm. Um, like all of these things are not what we're talking about are not cheap things. Um,
yeah,
and we're talking about things that are going to be, this is the long-term maintenance of your log home, but also really the long-term maintenance of your home and in general. Like even if you've got a vinyl sided house, you probably need to be taking these sorts of precautions, even even with that. So you're seeing it specifically. We're speaking specifically to log home industry because that's your expertise,
right.
and that's what we do at Log Home Network. But if you're listening to this and you just happen to be out there and you're just like, oh, well, that's a good idea. Get out the chainsaw, or get a chainsaw if you can, or clippers, or whatever it takes to just cut the little stuff around your place to to help build that fire break if you don't have one. Because you might be looking outside right now and be like, man, I'm in California and I don't have a fire break at all. That would be
Yeah,
action that you could take.
yeah. None of this is going to be inexpensive, and especially if you've lived in this log home for 20 years, 30 years, and you've let this overgrowth come in, or you haven't maintained your log home, or you haven't upgraded to fire prevention, features. Yeah, you're talking about a lot of money. As an example, we just finished fireproofing, fire resisting, however you want to call it, a home in a very fire. They've had some huge fires go through there in the last 6, 7 years, and so Allstate was going to cancel this fellow's insurance. And they said, you got to get rid of this wood deck, this wood railing. You've got to enclose your eaves. You've got to, they had a list of things, cut the trees back. And so this fella spent a couple $100,000, hardening his log home for that. But he was able to keep the insurance that he had with Allstate instead of paying the ridiculous fees that we're paying with the supposed Cal Fair plan, which is not a fair plan at all. But it's there because of all the different insurance people, the insurance companies, major insurance companies, State Farm, Allstate. We were canceled with, and I'm forgetting it now. It was one of the Hathaway Berkshire companies. Anyway, they canceled us, and so we had no choice but to go with the Cal Fair plan, which is 3 times the amount of our insurance before. And I can't imagine what's going to happen now. I mean, and that's a whole new discussion. But with the new rates that are going to be happening to people that live in fire prone areas, there's going to be people that can't afford the insurance to live in their house. Even though it's paid for, that they may be on a fixed income. They may not be able to afford to own that home with the insurance. So, then people are running naked or they don't have insurance. And so, and then, you get a fire and you've lost everything. So insurance is going to be a huge discussion, ongoing here, at least in our area, but it's going to happen across, the United States too, because there are fire prone areas besides just California too. So
Yeah.
that's a whole other subject, really, insurance and satisfying that agency.
So let's kind of like hit through the list here. Let's do that in a minute, and then we'll have a second to kind of like you gather your thoughts and see if there's something that maybe we missed. I want to make sure we kind of have hit everything that you've mentioned here.
Okay.
Somebody with these fires that are coming through, is it likely that by the nature of these fires, it's just going to be all out destruction, or with some of these log homes, might they just incur small, minor damage or reparable damage on their homes? Do you know?
Every fire is different, and the wind and how it's driven makes a difference too. Some homes catch fire because the neighbor's propane tank exploded and it got their home on fire, or their car was parked too close to their neighbor's car was parked too close to their house and it caught fire. So there's lots of factors that happen. But, if a log home is in the path of a fire and it's been hardened, with measures that I've suggested here, you stand a pretty good chance of not having it burn, really. We have worked on homes that have been charred on one side. And so we've used methods such as media blasting to take the char off of these walls. And then we've restored them, through blasting and sanding and, borating to make them ready for a new finish and made them so that you can't really tell they went through a fire. That's been true on some interior fires that we've dealt with too in restoring these homes. So, yeah, to answer your question, there's not a hard and fast answer that your home won't get consumed in a fire. But if you've made some precautionary moves, invested some money, and done some of the suggestions that I've come up with here, you stand a better chance of surviving a fire with your log home.
Yeah, and surviving might be that you've incurred some damage, have to do something, right?
Correct.
And probably in a lot of cases, my guess is in a lot of cases that's going to be expected, because if fire has been that close to your home, it's likely there's been some impact that's happened, even if it's just the smell of smoke that you're having a hard time getting out of your home. There's going to be something that's probably that's going to be an expense to you at some point.
Yeah. Well, in here they do a lot of that fire retardant that you see that's all beautiful red coming out of those airplanes. It doesn't just hit your house, it hits neighboring houses. So we've been employed on, I can think of 3 or 4 times to clean these houses after a fire. And so, it probably helped preserve the log home. But on the other hand, it created, a fair amount of work to get all that red, repellent off of the home, the porches and the metal roof and things like that. So that's definitely something we've been involved with before too, is the cleanup after a fire. So,
and that's that happens through loghomesrestored.com. Is that where people would go if they're trying to seek some counseling on this?
Yeah, loghomesrestored.com if they need help, getting their home back to good shape, or if they need repairs, that would be the direction to go. If you want to talk to me about, how to harden your home and some consulting, that's where, you would go to the Herb at the loghomexpert.com, and we, reach out to us and we can help you, come up with some solutions before you have a problem.
Yep.
So.
Yep. That's Herb at the loghomexpert.com. The loghomexpert.com. Put the in there, right?
Yeah, get the in there.
Yep. Okay. So let me hit the bullet list here that we have, kind of like that kind of like circles back around. So this is kind of like the recap time.
Okay.
So I'm going to run through these, but if there's something we have to, let me make a mental note of something that we have to come back to or stop me.
Okay.
Landscape and how it affects fire. Breaks around your house, basically create breaks around your house. No growth up against your house. Just think about that landscaping, and think about how you're going to have to maintain that long term to keep that away from your home. That's good for fires, but it's also good for just bugs. It's good for a log rot, things like that, where moisture and things can get up against your home.
Right.
Porches and railings and clutter around these areas. So, putting, a couple weeks worth or a month's worth of firewood, having that on your porch, not a great idea. The lattice work underneath, that trim that a lot of people like to have underneath their porches. I mean, it looks great, but a lot of that lattice work is made out of just basically a tinder, dry material. And from what I understand, what's that?
It's kindling.
It's kindling. And from what I understand, no paint you put on that is going to be good. It might only be a mild retardant. It's not going to do enough
Exactly.
to stop that from burning.
It might slow it down a minute.
Yep. The railings, we tend to like these nice thin wood railings. Thinking about metal railings is probably going to be better for log home maintenance, long-term maintenance. And so, yeah, it's a little bit different, but with metal railings, you can really get creative. There's a lot of decorative metal railings, and I'm sure that there's designers out there that can make this fit the kind of aesthetic that the log home owner is, that will be satisfying to them. So
Yeah, we've done
don't
that many times. That's something we've done to create a metal railing that you can see through, and it complements the log home.
so don't pigeonhole yourself in your design idea, I guess, would be something that a theme that's going to be an ongoing theme here.
Yep.
Venting into attic spaces. And from what I understand, there's vents that can close automatically when the heat gets up there, but they can also be closed manually. Now, these
Yes.
aren't going to be as inexpensive as your off the shelf generic vent.
Yes.
And you want to make sure probably that they've got the metal trim on them instead of the vinyl trim. Right.
For sure.
Yeah. Roofing materials. Now you mentioned, I was talking about how I would prefer to go with metal roof anyway, but you also said slate. Is that what you said?
Well, or flat tile. You guys
Flat tile is what you
more
said.
slate on the East Coast. We see very little slate out here, but slate would be a good fireproof, or fire resistant roofing.
If you're really going swanky, copper.
Oh, yeah.
that's that's pricey stuff. But to go with a metal is going to be economical, and you can still, you can get metal roofs that you can get it to look really nice. It's, there's something that looks great about the, architectural shingles and different things like that, but that's probably not going to be your best bet, and it's not going to be your most maintenance free option down the road as well. So when you think about your roof and you're designing out your home, and you think about my roof cost me this much money, you probably should know that, because your builder is going to be able to tell you kind of what you're paying for each of these big pieces of your project. You're
Right.
going to be you should automatically tell yourself, okay, in 20 years or in whatever it is, I need to do that again anyway. So,
Yeah, I'm redoing roofs on homes I built 30 years ago. But they're putting composition back on them
yeah.
because of the price.
uh, how the dormers and gable ends are constructed. Did we talk about this?
We did. We talked about, what if you're using cedar siding on your gable ends up above
Yeah.
the log walls, or on your dormers, or even your trim on your windows. You're better off using a 2x6 than a 1x4, because 1x4 is kindling, 2x6 is a substantial board. So there's some benefits of the trim that you use. And, on the gable ends, I mean, you could use a half log, which would probably be substantial too, but there's also membranes that are fireproof or fire resistant. Yeah, I hate to use the term fireproof, because there's not really anything that's fireproof in a total firestorm. But there's resistant materials that you can put behind the sidings that would help it from penetrating through the wall on the gable ends.
Yeah. Windows that have the metal trim, not the vinyl trim.
Yeah, I've seen nice Anderson windows, which is a great brand. It's the largest selling out there. But I've seen even the little stops that are vinyl let go, and the window come out after the heat of a fire. And the vinyl windows that are sold everywhere now, are even more susceptible. They have the same type of stop. So once those get hot, or melt, or they deform, the glass can come out, and that lets the fire in the house. So
Yep. Tempered glass.
tempered is important.
Yeah.
It resists the fire a whole lot better than just regular glass.
The outside finish on the home, the materials used for that, don't use the oil based, is what I recall on that one. Don't
That would
use
be
the,
my suggestion. Now there are oil-based, stains that are less. The problem with oil bases is that, they're more susceptible to fire the newer they are because they still have the VOCs in them, and that is what can make them catch fire. Excuse me, an older log home with an oil finish that's dried for 5 years, that's not going to be necessarily susceptible.
okay. The trim and lattice work we talked about, structures next to your log home. So other structures like might be an unattached garage,
Could be
or
an
what do you,
garage, could
yeah,
be the firewood storage,
yeah,
building. It could be the water heater lean-to that's on the end of the house. Could be your wife's flower garden that got attached to the end of the house. So, those type of structures are all kindling as far as
right. You gotta think about like everything that you're trying to do to protect your home has just been extended into whatever that other thing is.
correct.
So, which makes it really hard if it's firewood storage.
Yep.
Because you're just storing all those raw BTUs ready. So
Yeah.
that can be a challenge. I think that's going to be a significant challenge for a lot of people. I know that would be a challenge for me as I think about because I really want to have a nice rock fireplace. My dad built. My dad and I was probably I don't know eight. No, I was older than that. I was probably 12, 13, 14, and he would lower all the rocks down on a pull on a chain, and I was kind of like pushing it into place, and he would do all the cement work and everything. He built a motorized rotisserie upstairs with a nice. It's got a beautiful, nice opening where it's motorized rotisserie. I don't know if I care as much about the rotisserie, but a nice rock fireplace is. So when you got a fireplace, you're thinking, I want to have wood to put in the fireplace. And then you're going to be thinking, well, where am I going to store that
Exactly.
wood? So if you're on a multi-floor and you've got a walkout basement, my guess is, well, if you've got a cement, if you've done a cement foundation, that storing some of that inside downstairs, that's already in your home. If your home was going up and that wood was catching on fire anyway, I'm sure your home is already under massive threat.
Right.
So, but the attached storage for that any of that wood, I can see that being an issue in the way that I think, because I don't want to have to go far for it. Um, Access to your log home for fire trucks, emergency vehicles. We talked about groundwork, maintaining the groundwork in post. Don't just this isn't just a one-time deal. I'm getting my home built, my driveway's done, and now I don't care about it except this 8 foot wide, you know, drive that I'm gonna maintain. You got to be thinking for large trucks and bushes and all of that's growing up. The signage to your home. We didn't mention that. What were your thoughts on that?
Well, when you call 911, you really want them to be able to find you. Now, technology's come a ways, but technology doesn't always work when there's a fire or an emergency event. So, having your house properly identified as far as the address out at the street or at every bend coming in there is important. I mean, we deal with this all the time. We're trying to find a log home that we're supposed to go inspect, and they give us an address, and it's not on Google or it's not on maps, and so we're, yeah, you think about if the ambulance was trying to get there or a fire truck and he's having the same struggle we're having getting there based on the address. Signage is huge. I mean, if you're calling the fire department, I got a fire at 5551, but 5551 is next door to 52 and it's on a driveway that's, a quarter of a mile past that. There's lots of issues that we see that the address is just a huge thing. I mean, we tell people that. We said, your house is hard to find in an emergency. You really might think about better signage so that, I know you don't want the salesman to find you, but we're
You
trying to
want
help
you
out.
want an ambulance to find you if you need an ambulance.
Yeah. So get some
Yeah.
numbers up there. So that's what that's pretty much about.
Okay. Communication to others once a fire breaks out. Are you thinking like neighborhood sort of communication, or is this like family?
Both, because and some of these communities, the neighbors do have kind of a communications network set up, especially where there's one road in, like many communities in the mountains, and there's some sort of emergency, they're cut off. I mean, cell phones don't work all the time in the mountains. Landlines are even worse because trees fall down on them, or power lines, fall on telephone lines. They're just, the combination of things going wrong happens pretty quickly. So, I mean, yeah, two-way radios is an option, but I'm just saying if you can, if your family can get a hold of a neighbor and you have some sort of communication network set up, I think that's important.
Yeah.
And we suggest that to customers that are real remote, especially.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. I follow exactly where you're going with that. I would say, I would piggyback onto that. Something else that might be good to set up and have access, that your neighbors have access to and you have access to your neighbors, would be, a driveway camera. I mean, they got these
Yeah.
cheap game cams now that are hooked to cell. Well, I mean, they're going to be hooked to. They're still going to have to communicate though. But you might that might be helpful, because you might also know, well, the cell towers are down in my area. There's no
Yeah.
communication in my area. But cameras can be a great, just general security kind of thing. You can be letting your neighbors know, hey, I'm going out of town for the weekend. You have access to it. In close knit areas, people are more than happy to keep an eye out.
And that's true in a lot of mountain communities.
Is that Yeah,
It's a little harder in resort communities because those are second or third homes, and some people, they may know the neighbor closest to them, but they don't know the community so much. So it gets a little more complicated in the second home type market. So
yeah. And backup water sources, like the water reservoirs you talked about, like the swimming pools and things like that. A swimming pool is going to get sucked dry in no time, is my guess. A pump truck can empty a lot of fluid in a very short amount of time.
exactly. Yeah,
Um,
a storage tank, 4 or 5 thousand gallons
yeah.
is another alternative.
Is- yeah.
I live next to a river, so I'm kind of reconsidering getting a pump that I can have down there at the river and fight my own fire. I mean, that I'm going to be the guy there with the water hose as the fire is licking at my back door. So, and my wife's screaming at me to get out of there. But again, being somewhat self-sufficient is what I'm trying to, think, let people know they should be that, because the fire department may not be there in 20 minutes,
Yeah.
So
Yeah. If there's people out there that are listening to this, you're in the thick of this, or you've experienced this in the past, and that there's certain things that worked for you or did not work for you, I'd love to hear it. You can email me direct at dana@loghome.net. That's DANA at loghome.net. Herb Meeker, you've gotten his contact information, but Herb at theloghomexpert.com.
right.
And if you're looking at, you've got damage, loghomesrestored.com, Herb at loghomesrestored.com. You can get in touch with there. But if you're just looking for the consulting side, then you can use Herb at theloghomexpert.com. Is there anything that we missed here that you wanted to hit on, or any final thoughts or words?
I don't think so. We touched on insurance. We'll stay away from the political side of this so that we don't ruffle any feathers, but it definitely comes up in these conversations. But again, I would caution people to be prepared and be, somewhat preemptive in making your home more fire resistance and make it, someplace that's more of a refuge. And these things, you may not want to go down the road to escape because the fire could be coming up the road. So hardening your home and sheltering in place may be your only option in these situations. So consider that as you're, thinking about the expenses, but also it could be saving your life, and it could be a survival situation for you too. So again, be preemptive in that, and reach out to a consultant. There are people that that do this for a living. They are in place to harden your home, whether it's a log home or conventional home. But again, if it's a log home, we definitely can help you on that too, because we have some experience in that area. So
Yeah. And if it's a matter of coming down to loss of life, look, your life is worth so much more than your home. I know that it's got to be hard when you're watching your dream burn to the ground. It's got to be bringing tears to some people's eyes. It's got to be bringing a tremendous amount of hurt and ache. But all of these things are in scripture are vapor.
they are.
This life is short, and your soul is worth so much more. So get to safety, get to get away. I know it's going to be hard to walk away from things in your home and everything, and knowing that there's a lot of areas where looters and people are taking advantage of people, and that's just makes me sick to think about that. But we do definitely hope that you stay physically safe and that you don't wait so long to leave these areas that you can't leave. That would be worse, far worse. Herb, it's been great having you to pour in. I was talking to Donald Parsons from Appalachian Log Structures, and I don't know if you guys have ever met, but I think you guys are so similar. Have you met him?
No, I said I'd like to.
Yeah. Because I feel like, and I told him this earlier today, we were on the phone, and he's from Appalachian Log Structures, applog.com. And I told him when we got done, I feel like I have just sat by a well with just a ton of information.
Right.
And you, Herb, are a well of knowledge. And I, super appreciate that you've taken the time, that you thought of me to take the time and do this and to get this recorded and get this out there. I'm going to try and get this out there as soon as I can, because I know this is an imminent, issue for a lot of people. But thank you so much. And
thank you.
Yeah. All right.
See ya.
Take care. All right. We'll see you.
Too. Bye-bye.
Thank you for being with us on this episode of the Log Home Network podcast. If you are searching for your log home dream, I invite you to check out loghome.net. I hope that you go and build that awesome log home that you've been dreaming about. If you are a log home expert and would like to guest on this program or learn about our advertising options, I invite you to reach out to me directly, Dana, D-A-N-A, at loghome.net. Catch you next time.